welcome to Somewhere Down North on the Purple M.I.C podcast. We are so excited to have author Jason Rhodes, new author of already top ranked book on Amazon.com, Somewhere Down North. Please make sure you go and look on Amazon.com and make sure you get that book. We are going to be discussing it today, but most importantly, we're going to have an opportunity to just dig a little bit deeper into the stories that Jason tells in this book. And so I want to introduce Jason Rhodes to our platform. He is a writer, a litigator, a licensed clinical social worker, and a keeper of history. He is a practicing attorney, licensed clinical social worker, former adjunct professor, author, and third-degree Black belt in Kempo. Am I saying that right? Karate?
That's right.
He grew up in Winbrook Housing Projects in White Plains, New York, and now serves the state of Maryland as a litigator in children in need of assistance cases. Now, that is the story that is on the book for everyone else, but he is also one of my dearest friends, someone I call a brother. He is a classmate, but most importantly, a beloved friend and brother to me and my husband, former teammate of my husband's. And I see him as a personal friend and as a brother. So as we are talking, I'm offering him insight. We really feel like we're opening up our conversations about his book to the world through this podcast. But Jason, welcome. And we are, like I said, super excited to be able to talk about Somewhere Down North in community. I have to laugh, Jason, at the fact that we sat here for 30 minutes and tried out, right, how to go on to this podcast. And it would just be you and I on the screen. It wouldn't even allow that to happen. It had to show the gallery view and show those people who you love. So it's classic format for God to say, no, you always are coming onto platforms with a village of people behind you. You never step into a space, just you. And so it's just the opening, I'm just saying, is just classic Jason Rhodes to come onto a platform and have a glance of the people that he loves in the background. And so we're so super excited to be here. So Jason, let's get started. First question, of course, let's just talk about what made you write this book for now. I know you had the stories, but for this time specifically, what made you do this now?
Yeah, so it didn't start out as a book. My grandmother, who raised me since I was 2, and you can see my Aunt Brenda on the Zoom right now. So she's well aware of this, and of course I'm 2, so she told me a lot of these stories. But raised me since I was 2, and it was a situation where my maternal mother came with her parents, which are my paternal grandparents, and came to my Dorothy Rhodes, which is my paternal grandparent, um, and said, either you or foster care. So basically gave my paternal grandmother a choice. Either she took us or we would end up in foster care. So that's how I came to live in Winbrook at the age of 2. And so if you fast forward years later, on the other end of that, my grandmother came to live with me after, graduation, high school graduation, college graduation. And she was living with my family. And in her later years, she started to suffer from dementia. And so when she started to suffer from dementia, it, was progressive. It was a situation where she couldn't remember. She would repeat a lot. And then it slowly transformed until, she started not being able to recall. And so she ended up in the nursing home. But the nursing home came about because she had twisted and broke her hip. And so she was in the hospital. And so when she was in the hospital, you don't, I guess, heal from a fractured hip in a couple of weeks. So she had to go into short-term care. Once she went into short-term care, it seemed like the her dementia prognosis started to go even faster. And it started to go even faster where she had like an open bed sore where her spine was it was from the skin to the spine, and there was possibility of an infection. So she then had to go to long term for that to heal. In the course of doing that, in the course of her being in the nursing home, she started to lose her ability to recall, speak, um, anything that you can think of. And it's super hard when you can look at a person, they look the same,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not the same. And you can't see that they're not the same. You see the same physical person. In addition to that, you have all the memories that you have of that person as, like as a superwoman or whatever that person meant to you. So I used to go to the movies directly after visiting because it's just I had to get into another world, another space, and I don't care what the
Mm-hmm.
movie was, I just had to go. And what I started to do, I started to write. And when I was writing, um, and it's a direct correlation. She started losing her ability to recall, so I would write down what I thought, uh, we would be talking about, and it became stories. And then I started posting those stories onto Facebook, and so just wasn't stories about her; it was stories about the community because she was a person within that community. So when I'm describing her, I had to also describe the other things that were around her that made the scene. And so once that started happening, people started responding to the stories. And when they responded to stories over the course of 5 years, everyone's like, where's the book? Where's the book? Where's the book? And I never intended for it to be a book, but after 5 years of people saying, where's the book? I said, hey, maybe I'll do a book. So that's how it came about. But it took, 5 years, and it's 5 years of writing, and it's about 400 pages. The actual book that we put out, it's like volume one because, no one's really going to read a first-time author 400 pages. So I had to split it up, and it's different volumes. And this covers basically from 1929 to around 82, 83. And so the second book is going to cover from 83 to 1995. And then the third book is 1995 until my current time.
I love it. And
Mhm,
so, Jason, it sounds like this book was very healing for you as you were watching the process. Can
mhm,
you talk to us about that healing journey? Because as your grandmother is going through this dementia um, diagnosis, and you're also writing these stories
mhm.
and recovering the memories, can you talk about the healing journey for yourself?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's healing because it's almost like when you have a cut or a scab and it won't heal. And it's all right for a second, and then you rip the band-aid off, and then it's right back to its original condition. So that's how I felt because I don't feel like even now I don't feel like I've completely healed or gotten over it.
Mhm.
Um, but in the course of that, there was a situation where she had lost her ability to speak, and I'm just at her bedside, and again I'm writing, and I had to stop because now I was communicating with God. Like God was talking to me, I was talking to him, and it's all in my head, and I'm hearing his voice. And he says, remember when you used to be in 159, 135, and there was always a closet, an open closet, and the closet was always dark. And so as a young kid, you imagine monsters, dragons, whatever. And I was very fearful looking into that closet because it was just like my imagination just going wild. And it was always something scary. And then God says, okay, next thing is like, remember when your grandmother used to go out and she used to catch the bus to New Jersey because she used to work at Jackwell Cells, which was right across from Ridgeway. But then her job changed and they had to move to Jersey. So she was taking a 3-hour trip, you know, to get to Jersey. We're talking about a bus and stops and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So she would leave at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I was fearful of that because, I live in the projects and anything can happen. And I've seen anything happen. So I'm fearful of that. And he gave me the next step. And he's like, remember, you were worried about this. And then after a series of remember this, remember this, remember this, God was like, I always had you.
Yeah.
And it was just this revelation. And I'm talking about things that go back far. I mean, super far. And stuff I hadn't thought about in years. So that gave me an opportunity to, even get closer to God. And there's no greater healing than that. Um, and I always credit my grandmother, for introducing me to God. And it was, not something that she pulled me aside to initially. I was curious because she was on her knees and she was praying. And her room was right before mine, depending on how you look at it. We had the back room, me and my brother Elgin. And when I would walk, a lot of times I would, my eye would catch her on her knees on her bed with her hands clasped and she's talking out loud, like she's praying out loud. And I don't see anybody. So I'm like, who are you talking to? At one point I said, who are you talking to? And she said, I'm talking to God. And I said, who's that? And this is, when I'm pretty young, like 5, 6. And she explained to me who it was, and she explained, how important he was. And from that moment on, she was like, you should try it, you should pray. So I did. And I felt a sense of calm even then. And, my prayers weren't much, but I felt a sense of calm. And I noticed with her, my Aunt Dean, my Aunt Irene, that they had similar lives. Miss Edwards, who was in 6A, they had similar lives, that they would pray, they would rely, that they would count on him. And it's like it was a person that was standing next to him. And they would just talk at any given moment and talk about God. And, in an environment that we grew up in and I don't mean just the projects, I mean America,
Mhm.
that environment where they're labeled as less than, they drew strength from that. And so, through my own personal revelation with my relationship with God, I see how they gain that strength because it's not really them. It's a higher being that's providing that protection and that comfort. So,
You know what's interesting about, and so once again, I'm going to reiterate, we're letting the world in on our conversations
hmm
in this space. And so, what is interesting about your answer to the healing part is that I am coming from a position of watching you in the process.
hmm
And so to be able to be one of those people that was reading over the 5 years,
hmm
also um, watching you from middle school all the way to now, the healing journey that I was talking about
hmm
the is the power of your presence and your words and your friendship that you give out when you had all of these things going on the inside.
hmm
And so what reading this for me did was gave me some understanding of how you were actually taking all of what you were getting in and processing a healing, not just for yourself and the loss of your grandmother in this state, but you were healing generational things.
hmm
You were healing community. The book alone, you mentioned people in the book that in Wimbrook and in White Plains and in Westchester that people know. And it's been a healing journey. So even though it may be at the detriment of that wound, right, that you feel is always open, somehow God takes that wound and creates healing for everyone else. And so I have been one of those people that have received the benefit of hearing the stories when I needed a brother who knew God,
hmm
right? A Black man who could actually speak to his experience with God, not just Bible and all of that, but like, no. And so when you would talk about your grandmother, it was definitely, Jason, like we knew we were getting something that was real, that she
Mhm.
had deposited something in you, that you were able to give to other people in when they were going through.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah,
I definitely feel like you have been an example of how the deepest pain could come out and you just bless people on the other side.
yeah, and I don't like to take credit for any of that. So I always say
I know.
to God be the glory, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not about me.
That's
It's not
right.
about, because we all go through these things. And so I think we all, if we allow ourselves to be connected, then we'll be connected.
Yes.
If we try, if we don't, and you can see the strife in this world. When this one is against that one against this one, and people try to be predominant in whatever shape or manner. I mean, we're living that right now. And the wonderful thing about Winbrook is that Winbrook, I don't care who you were, they had your back. If you lived in Winbrook and you associated with people in Winbrook, no one could mess with you unless they were in Winbrook. And it was a community. And you can walk in the hallway, you can walk outside, you can walk in the playground, wherever you walk. That was a community, that was a family. And in fact, most of the stories, or a lot of stories, the community stories, I talked to people and I interviewed people and I said, did I remember this right? Because I didn't want
Right.
to just go
Right.
off of my memory. My memory is of 11-year-old, a 14-year-old, whatever. And there's older people who said, yeah, that was happening, but this was also happening. And so I talked to a lot of, I call them, hustlers or whatever, um, on their end about what was happening because we used to walk through just to get to the playground, this overhanging trees where all the people that, may have been in or out of jail came and they hung out. And we never got touched. No one ever confronted us, even though your mind is going to that place like, oh, what would I do if something happened? And when I talked to them, they told me, the word had already been out that you never talk, never harm the kids. You never approach them. You never try to bring them into this game. And I always say that's unique because you have a lot of places like Winbrook or projects where that's not exactly the case. Like they'll grab you at 12, they'll grab you at 11, they'll grab you whenever,
Mhm.
and that just wasn't Winbrook. So I think Winbrook is a special place. I think, and a lot of things that I refer to in the book is about Southern mothers. I think that
I was just about to go there.
most of the people that we grew up with, they came from the South. And so they're coming with that, and I'm not going to say baggage, but they're coming with that trauma. The South could do whatever they wanted to do and then claim they didn't do it, you know, and get away with it, to put it short. And that's anything, that's any and everything. And so most of those Southern mothers came up north looking for an opportunity for their families. And so we all knew and they knew that we were all in this together. And that's how I feel now. That's why the book is important. So I'll talk about other people, but I'm not going to necessarily talk about myself. If you even read the book, I'm barely in it. And I wrote it.
I
You
mean,
know.
so to that point, right?
Hmm.
One of the most, so I'm gonna ask you, I know how you are, but I'm
Hmm.
gonna have to ask you to go there because one of the sections of the book, as a mother, let me
Hmm.
tell you the part where you talk about someone coming, you know, um, it was you describe it as the voices you hear coming up and the guy says, oh, apartment number, and you can hear you describe the setting
Hmm.
of them coming to
Hmm.
like basically hold a gun to your grandmother's head,
Hmm.
coming in there, and I'm gonna let you describe it more.
Hmm.
However, what hit me the most was like you describe this thing and you describe these women like we're not letting you do this.
Hmm.
And they come in and they, in essence, take this whole situation under control
Hmm.
as mothers and say, no, no, this is not happening here.
Hmm.
So at the end of that particular chapter, I was sitting there saying like, wow, Jason,
Hmm.
like, what did it, what, What what happened to you after that? Like what were your thoughts after that? And then you just so eloquently go on to like, it's not about me.
Yeah.
This is who, this is the
Yeah.
next story. This is the
So
next page.
yeah, so first of all, I was two in that story. So my aunt Brenda, who's on this line, she's told me that story several times. I've heard
Wow.
that story several times from my grandmother, from other individuals throughout time. So it's like I can close my eyes and repeat that story a thousand times because I've heard it that many times. And you
Hmm.
think about that, it's not a normal story. I mean, that's something out of the ordinary, that's not ordinary, rather. And it, even when I want to say later in life, I think I was 45, 46, I had the opportunity to talk to my father, and who was missing throughout my life.
Hmm.
Um, and he allowed me to tape record him, and I tape recorded him for 3 hours, and he pretty much told me everything I was seeking when I was 12, when I was 13, when I was 14, when I was 15, when I'm questioning why are we with, and even younger, why are we with my grandmother and not with our father? And he filled in the blanks. And so one of the things that he filled in the blanks was this story right here, you
Wow.
know. And that person, it was my biological mother and her boyfriend. And her boyfriend was about, you know, if she was at that time, if I'm two, at that time she's either 18 or 19, right? And he was 30 something, right? And my father was 21, and he was in the armed forces. And so he recounted that story. And the reason, one of the reasons he left is, and this is not in this particular book, it's in the next book.
Hmm.
That same guy pistol whipped him in the diner, with the
Mm.
handle, the butt of the gun, and he decided that he was going to kill him or, you know, do something. And my grandfather stated to him, and this is according to my father, that I can't have a son of mine going to jail
Hmm.
or being killed. So he sent him down to Alabama, where he was supposed to go to school. And after 4 years, this is the deal that they had between each other, between him, my grandmother, and my grandfather, that he would finish 4 years of school and he would come back and get me and my brother, which was my brother Elgin, and I'm Jason. And it's funny, I'm just thinking Elgin Jason because I heard that all my life. Elgin Jason was never just Jason, it was just like Elgin Jason, like it's one name. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, um,
Yeah, you did kind of just
yeah.
separate it
So
later in life.
yeah. So it was a situation where I spoke to him and he reiterated that story. Right. And then my aunt told me the story. And then my grandmother told me the story. And then several other family members told me the story. And so it's a situation where I don't really have a relationship with my biological mother. The person that has provided for me my entire life has been my grandmother. She's like my grandmother and my father and my mother, all wrapped up in one. And so that's why I thought it was important to dedicate this book, because my sister, who's my sister on my mother's side, we had a conversation later in life. And, without being specific, she told me how she grew up. And all I'm going to say is I dropped down on my knees and I prayed and I thank God.
Yeah.
Right. Because where I grew up, it was wonderful. My grandmother treated me wonderful. I was loved. I was loved by my Aunt Dean. I was loved by my Aunt Irene. I was celebrated by them every single time they saw me. They made a big to-do about it. They told me I was, wonderful, beautiful, great, fantastic, would always ask me about, what am I going to do in life, and it was never a situation where I wasn't celebrated. And I know just in the industry that I work in now, as far as being an attorney working in child and children in need of assistance, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
I see the exact opposite in my day-to-day work. So I always have this constant reflection going back and forth. If I go to work, I think about home, right? Because I was in that situation. Remember how we started this off? Either you or foster care. So foster care is in my life one way or the other. And so I see the result of foster care. So it's like God is constantly reminding me how blessed I am, right, on a day-to-day basis.
I was going to ask you, how has your, that was one of the questions I had for you. How does your life experience influence how you approach your work as like you're speaking for the interests of children? How does it impact you?
Mhm. Number one, I mean, the one thing I try to do, like, let's say if I'm trying a case, I never am derogatory towards the mother or father, no matter what they've done. And they've done some heinous things. But I try to give that respect. And one of the reasons I try to give that respect, because they are the mother, they are the father, is that my grandmother, my aunt Irene, my aunt Dean, they were very kind people. And they were kind people, to the extent that it doesn't matter what was going on in life or in the world. They always had a smile and they always were thankful, and you got to think about what they went through, in 1929, the Great Depression in 32, then you got, you know, segregation, you got before the civil rights, you got them watching Martin Luther King get murdered, you watching Malcolm X get murdered, watching Medgar Evers get murdered, and they have kids.
Right.
And so that hope dims, but they're walking around smiling, right? Their job opportunities are limited, but they're walking around smiling, right? They're told they can only go so high, but they're walking around smiling, right? And they're singing and they're praising God like this is the best life ever, right? And then they have this hope that they instill in us, that they put into us and say, you're going to go further. That's selflessness. So who am I to come along and say, yeah, it's me? Because it ain't me,
Right.
right? It ain't never been me. It's been people that have poured into me that allows me to think the way I think, move the way I move, and give credit to others because that's what they did. So I'm not going to be different than what they were, right? I'm gonna like whatever I am, I have pieces of them. Like my Aunt Irene was a great storyteller. She could tell a story, she'd have you fucking howling. And that's why I used her story, Skeeter's Tale, because that to
Mm-hmm.
me encaptioned who she was. Right? She can light the room on fire. My Aunt Dean, oh my goodness, she's talking about just pure love. That's all she was, right? And I don't know, I must have been 40 something before she stopped giving me, sending me something for my birthday. You know, here's a little something, you
Right,
know,
right. A little something for
and
you.
and I take it, right? Then you got my Uncle Mike who's in the book,
Right,
right?
right.
Who to me was the coolest guy on earth, right? The way he
Yes,
talked, the way he moved. I saw his girlfriends that came over, and I'm, 5 or 6, and I'm thinking they there for me because I have no context of why they're here. I know they're nice to me, so they must be there for me, right? And I'm
right.
dancing for them, and I'm doing whatever. And my uncle's just, like, yeah, that's my little nephew, whatever. And here's something that he said too. So he got married to my aunt Selma, and he's passed now. And so Selma came up here to visit me and um yeah, me and my family up here in Baltimore. And she pulled me aside. She's like, I never told you this. I wanted to tell you this. She said, before me and Mike got together, he said to her, I come as a package. Me, my grandmother, and my nephews, Elgin and Jason. And that just
Oh,
made me just start crying.
absolutely.
Right. And now you got my Aunt Brenda. So my Aunt Brenda, I told you this a couple of times, I guess. Um, when you're young, you're trying to figure out who you are. And I always wanted to be smart. And my Aunt Brenda was smart, right? And she went to Tuskegee, she's a nurse now, but just super intelligent. Like the books that we have, they're her books. Like that's in the bookshelf. We had a dresser drawer that with the drawers pulled out and it's just books, right? So we didn't have no regular bookshelf, but we made a bookshelf, right? And I would go past that and I'm like, Brenda read this. Brenda read that. taking these thick books, and one of them was Roots, right? I'm like, oh my God, you got to be super intelligent to read this. Because, I got through a couple of pages, but I would, just keep, because the words, like I didn't know the words at the time. I'm spelling it out, I'm chopping it up, sounding crazy. But I'm like, if Brenda can do it, I can do it. If Brenda can do it, I can do it. So, you find little things that push you forward,
Yes,
And plus, my aunts are telling me I'm smart. Mom's telling me I'm smart,
yes.
So who am I to say different? You know?
I mean, that's so powerful, Jason, in terms of just the affirmations that you were getting from, once again, from your community. And so I want you to just take a moment to
Mhm.
just let us hear you read from the book because
Yeah,
you
but,
can,
but but before we do that, I'm gonna read, right? But I want
okay,
to say
yes.
something about Miss Sandra too, because it just came in my head. I gotta say
Okay,
this.
go ahead, go ahead.
So Miss Sandra used to be used to be my camp counselor, right?
Uh-huh.
And Miss Sandra didn't play, right? So there's certain people you listen to, and certain people you don't, right? Because we were rowdy, and I know we were rowdy, and we would go, and Miss Sandra would tell us, like, you better get it together, or you ain't going in this pool. And we be grumbling to each other, yeah, we go in this pool. She's like, no, you not, and we would fall in line, right? And it's one of those things like that was a big thing going to the pool because we're in the projects and we come down Fisher Avenue, we go to the Fisher Avenue pool. And to us, that's like, that's heaven, you
Right.
know. But I had to share that. And Miss Sam just all throughout my life anyway, just would always encourage us, give us advice, me and my brother always look out for. So I had to say that. All right, well, I'll read something from the book. And Miss Teresa, when we were working together, right, at state of Maryland, uh Miss Teresa just from the Bronx, right? So we got that in common, the New York thing, but just number one, super intelligent too. So I like intelligent people, but super intelligent, down to earth, and just a caring person. So, you find people throughout life who remind you of where you come from, right? Even though she's from the Bronx, but it's one of those things. All right, so I'm gonna read some. All right. So this one is somewhere down north and it's called Blues and I'll read it and I'll describe why I wrote it. All right. So this is from 1929 to 1980s. It says, Ma came from a time of the blues and jazz, a time of heat, dirt roads, rural living, general stores, a period of fear and knowing your place. Ma was from the South, Georgia to be exact, and there was a certain pain attached to that. I don't think it can be argued that Southern nights birthed the blues, plucked guitars, brought in on worn feet, lips to harmonicas, and a story. Over the course of time, the slow wails, plaintive calls, and sounds found different exit on the cornet, traveling further south, tucked somewhere down in New Orleans, amongst cobblestone streets, smoky houses, and swayed hips just off the waterfront where people poured in off the ships. Eventually northward into polished mob-backed New York clubs, dressed up in tuxedos, sped up. Meanwhile, interlopers snuck into old southern shacks and completed the robbery and called it rock and roll, America. Now, the reason I wrote that is because I talk about music a lot. And I think Black folks in particular, that's the one area that we've been allowed to be involved in, or at least people make money off. So it has a more public domain than other things. Um, and so when you think about the blues, our existence in this country, if we're referring, we have to make it parallel to something. It's parallel to the blues. We sung the blues because we were experiencing the blues, right? And so for a long time, particularly that 1929s, 1930s, and up to 1950s, and even now, I mean, we can sing the blues now. But that blues morphed. When I came along in the 60s, I came along in the 70s, but right before that, in the 60s, you had it morph into, people like the Stylistics, Blue Magics. You had the love songs, and, you had Sam Cooke before that. And by the 70s, you had, Marvin Gaye making his transition. You had Teddy Pendergrass. And so you had this just raw talent. And I don't know if you can remember, back in the 70s, you had to actually be able to sing to be on the radio. They didn't play you unless you were able to sing. So you didn't have any, you know, individuals that couldn't sing. I was about to call out some names, but you didn't have individuals that couldn't sing on the radio. It was prime time spots, right? So everything you heard, it was beautiful, and it had to do with us. It was telling a story about us over and over and over and over again. And so, if you're from New York, we had WBLS, you had Kiss FM. And so that became a part of your life. I don't recall a time existing, waking up without the radio on, coming in the house without the radio on, going outside without somebody playing the radio or playing their box. Back then it was a box and tapes and stuff like that. And then we had, DJs, DJ Scooney. And so you get into the music piece of it because I think we've always been wedded to the music. Like even right now, we've always been wedded to that. So that's like our form of expression as Black folks. And, we affect the world through that. And so I try to show that in the book because it also shows you the changing of time, right?
Absolutely.
So,
When you said the changing of time,
mhm.
so as I read the book and you went into, I'm just going to take a moment to just play a little bit of this song because it was a point in the book where I was like, you can't really even tell this story without framing the music,
Mhm.
right? Like you, because in the background you are given the soundtrack. So it was this song which you referenced in that next paragraph, Jason, where I'm just going to play it real quick, just for a couple of seconds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, play that. I can see it.
Here we go.
Everything must change, nothing stays the same. Everyone will change, no one stays the same. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold.
Now I have to stop it there so YouTube doesn't cut us off, Jason.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Now
That
that's something my grandmother used to sing too. So that has particular sentimental value to me. I could see that as soon as you started playing. I could see that in my head.
I mean, and so I wanted to now what everyone has to know is I did not tell Jason what song I was going to play before we started this. And I also did not know ahead of time. Well, he told we right before we got on, he told me what part he would read. So once again, is that spirit because you if you would have read just another paragraph afterwards,
Hmm.
you would
Yeah,
have
it
heard
starts
about
it starts with that. Yep.
yeah,
Hmm.
it says Ma used to listen to Bernard Igner's, if I'm pronouncing that right. Everything must change. A slow, haunting song explaining certain simple truths about life. The young become the old. Ma used to sing along, join his baritone, join him in his blues. Other times just sing, contemplating her own. She'd take over with her beautiful soprano, transforming it from a tall weeping oak to a lush bottom floor filled with purple petals, she sung. And when I read that, Jay, I really just was moved because once again, you're talking about your childhood, and I'm hearing that knowing we were the same age and the same spaces. but also being now older, we're older. And so we've seen how this song is now a truth of our very being and our very becoming who we are, right? Is that everything must change. And so as you are going forward with this book and sharing the stories, and you are an awesome storyteller, um, what change do you want to see come from the people who read this book?
Mhm. Yeah, I always go back to this because it's really simplistic, but it's something that we as people have not done. Because if we did, we'd be in a much better place. So, I go back to the Bible where it says that God, there's basically two commandments that the Bible really comes down to. And so it's love God with all your heart, right? And mind and soul. And the second one is treat people as you would want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
That second one, as a world, we have had difficulty um, coming to grips with. I mean, if we just look at what's happening now on a day-to-day basis, it's incredible that we are attempting to go back in time, knowing that it didn't work, knowing that it's hateful, knowing that it's not what God intends or wants, yet that's where we're heading. Now, the bright spot of that, you have people out of this rubble that rise up and they speak truth to power. And I've seen that a lot, and so that's encouraging because as long as we've been on this earth, no matter what we've gone through, the devil has not won, right? And is not going to win. That's foretold also. So he's going to try, and that's exactly what he's doing. But he's not going to win. So we know the end result. And so I want people to live in a way in which that we know that God says that we're going to win. And so when I speak about God, I speak about God. I don't care where I'm at. I've used it in court for closing arguments,
Mm.
um, because that's what we're called to do. I mean, one of the things that always gets me is that story about Peter, right? And he said, I'm gonna be your biggest supporter. And he goes, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be and he goes, before the crow clocks, 3 times you're gonna deny me. And I think we as people, we do that every day. We deny God every single day in some form or fashion. So I'm not gonna let a person look at me and say, "Oh, you this or that because you believe in Jesus." Yeah, I believe in Jesus, right? My whole life, I've seen it for myself. I can testify to it that who he is. The fact that this book is on Amazon, there's 44 million books in Amazon. 44 million.
Yes.
This book is ranking number two, number one. You think that's because I'm a great writer? It ain't because I'm a great writer. 40, possibly 44 million people greater than me as a writer. That's God putting it where it is, right? And part of the reason I believe that God is putting it where it is because I'm talking about God in the book. So he wants that message to be spread, and I'm going to spread it.
I love it. I love it. We love it. We're loving the book, Jason. Um, the chapter Precious Lord, where you once again, you're being very explicit about who empowered your family and who gave you these stories and who spoke to you to be able to write them down and get them recorded. I guess I know that your daughter had some influence on this book. So I want to know, as one day this book and the your name being on it, the stories being recorded, your children will be holding this book up,
Mhm.
talking about you as you have talked about your family. What do you expect what do you expect the stories are going to be with them
Mhm.
telling the story of their dad with this book?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that a different way. So
Okay.
when my grandmother, and I'm still gonna answer, but it's just gonna be different.
Mm-hmm.
When my grandmother came to live with me, right? I started having kids, and so I got 3 kids, and so they were one, two. Well, my oldest was 5, and then the twins came, so that's the age gap. And she used to sit on the couch and she would just look at them and she would just smile the biggest smile, just watching them. And so you got to really think about that. She has a past that stretches all the way back to 1929 and whatever she has seen. And then she's watching the future and she is thrilled, just pink, just watching them. And she's getting joy just by watching because she knows that they're the next generation. They're in furtherance of where she came from. And that's kind of how I look at my kids. Whatever it is, let's say, good about me, they're going to carry that on as a piece of them. And when I'm long gone, whenever they have kids, they're going to carry on, not just me, because I'm a piece of my grandmother. My grandmother's a piece of who came before her. Her mother was a piece of who came before her. So it's this lineage that, just goes throughout time. And that's what I see when I see my kids. Like a lot of times I don't believe they're my kids because I don't get that, right? I don't get like these human beings that think differently, that act differently, that have a certain personality are coming from me because my personality is different from theirs. I
Right.
see, of course, similarities here and there, but I'm like, that's God's creation. They're individuals. They do whatever they have likes. And I had to learn this, right? Because I could tell my son directly this is what I want done. This is going to get done. I can't talk to my daughters like that, right?
Right.
They'll fall apart and look at me like I'm crazy. Then I'm feeling bad, you
Right.
know. So it's certain ways that I've learned to talk to them, and I let them have at it. And sometimes they talk to me all crazy, and I'm like, all right now, and they know that look, and then they back up. But it's ways in which you communicate with them because they're three different distinct personalities, and whatever that spirit that is inside them, that's what God gave them. I gave them whatever, but there's something else working there,
Right.
you know. So I hope that answers your question. So they're going to talk about whatever they feel like talking about. My daughter did the book. She did the
Yeah.
design, right?
Yeah.
This is I used to walk in my living room and there used to be a black and white picture of my grandmother. And this is the picture that's on this right here. And one day I asked my grandmother, because she was older at that time, I said, "Who's that lady? Who's that pretty lady?" She was like, "That's me, fool." Right? She was like, "I was just younger."
Right.
You
Right.
know, I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, she's pretty." And I'm still talking to her like it's not her. I was like, "She's pretty." Now, my grandmother's always pretty. She's pretty when she's 80, 90 years old, but that's what I was referring to her back then when I was young. And it was just one of those situations where, there's that disconnect, because my youth or what have you, and not understanding everything. And that's why I'm saying there, as they gain their knowledge, you never know what has touched them, right? And I've said this on another podcast. I don't even joke with my kids in a negative way because I don't want them to mistakenly take that as something negative that I might possibly think of them. So every time I pour into them, it's always positive. And why do I do that? Because that's what my Aunt Irene did. That's what my Aunt Dean did. That's what my mother did. They never spoke negatively to me,
It's
you know?
powerful, Jason. That is so powerful. I mean, and I've even watched you with your children in sports and
Hmm.
working with young people and just hearing the things that you have done. Um, can you speak into the parent that is frustrated, struggling,
Hmm.
and has found themselves doing that very thing
Hmm.
besides a don't do it, but just speak to that next generation that is seeing this world
Hmm.
change,
Yeah,
and it's a
I don't
lot of
think it.
pressure to raise children now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna expand that because I don't think it's about having children. I think the greatest thing that you can experience in life is a smile, right? Where you have this one-on-one with a person and you're laughing, you're relaxed, and you're having these conversations. That's why we talk on the phone all the time, right?
Mhm.
Because we're enjoying life, we're forgetting the world, and we're just experiencing each other as people, right? And so for my kids, I can just be around them and be content, just as my grandmother was looking at them and talking to them or whatever. And I'll just sit there like her and I'll just be smiling, right? And they look at me like I'm crazy, like, but I realize what a gift they are, right?
Right.
And I realize, um, I'll say it to you this way because I just had this conversation with my son. And so my son plays traveling soccer. And so we went fishing this morning. So we up in the streams, we up in the mountains, we everywhere. That's why I'm tired right now. Right. But anyway, we're everywhere. And we're talking in the car. And I was telling about this situation back, in my youth. And I was like, and I always tell him about, stuff in my youth because I know he's going through the same thing just in a different time period.
Right.
And I said, I had to talk to this person one time, and this girl said, "Who do you think you are?" Right? And I said, "I'm Jason." And like that was the explanation, right? And the reason I said it like that is because we're all individuals, right? My experience is different than your experience. Your experience is different than my experience, right? And so whatever the collection is, that's me, right? And so I speak because I play basketball, and there's a certain bravado that has to go with that because when you're on the court and the older guys are knocking you down, whatever, you can't cry, you can't do, you got to get up and act like you a giant too, right? And so I carry that with me. Even now, I carry that with me, right? And he plays soccer. So he's constantly confronted by people who are trying to take advantage of him in a physical way, but it's really a mental way,
Mhm.
right? Because if someone, particularly with males, if someone can show dominance over you, it's almost like they own you, right? And as males, we don't allow that,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so there's always this war. But the first war is with yourself. Like you have to know who you are. And that's why I said what I said. It's like I'm Jason. And that meant something to me. It probably meant nothing to her, but it meant
Right.
something to me,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
And it was because of those voices telling you, Jason, there is something about Jason that's special. There is something about Jason.
Yeah,
It
my
was
mother
your
told me I'm
aunt. Yeah,
special.
yeah.
So I'm gonna believe her before I believe you. I knew,
That's
look,
right.
I knew her longer. I knew her longer and she knew me longer. So I'll trust her over you any day.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, as we are closing out this part of the volume one conversation, because there are going to be others. Um, I want you to just tell us as far as the next volumes and what your intentions. You kind of broke those down, but and I know you like I'm just getting this one, but
Uh,
what do you see? What can we expect? Because I mean, this volume was good, just the
mhm.
storytelling. But what can we expect in the next volumes,
Yeah,
Jason?
it's going to be a continuation because, like I said, my grandmother has been with me, all my life until recently, like 5 years. So it's still going to be a reflection of her. So she'll be a central theme throughout it. But what happens next, it really gets into from me 12 years old up into 25. And that is an extremely wild ride. Because you got basketball, you got girlfriends, you got school, you got identity. You're forming your identity at
Yeah,
that time. So, you know, at some point, you know, the balance was off. You know, I,
say more. The balance
huh?
was off. Say more.
Yeah, I see. I'm thinking to myself.
The
Um,
balance was off. Talk to
yeah.
me.
So I had an ego, right? And so my ego, you know this, you went to school with me. Uh, my ego was
Oh,
off.
see, I love the way you put the balance was off. Oh, your
Yeah,
ego. Okay,
yeah,
got it
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. So um it was one of those things, right? And you look back at life and sometimes you have regrets, right? And so, and I'll just share this part of it. So particularly like senior year, right? I was dating a lot of people. And I shouldn't have been dating a lot of people. That don't even sound right, but I was dating a lot of people. And I hurt some people because I was dating a lot of people. So it's one of those things where you live and you learn and you realize like everything is not a game, that people's feelings are involved, that people actually care. and you shouldn't take that for granted. Now that's a person who went through it, got ended up getting hurt himself, and that's why it's going up to 25 because I had a situation where I lost what I thought was going to be the future, and I'm trying to say it without saying it,
Hmm.
and it turned my life around. I had to make a pact with God where I said, God, if you save me, I'll never be that person again.
Right.
And so on the other side of 25, this is who I am, right? And I'm not going to take credit. My ego's not like this. And, a lot of self-deprecation. And I just find that's a better space because you're supposed to make room for God. And if you got an ego and it's all out here, what room is there for God? So I find that it's a better space. I find that I'm at peace more. I find like I'm not competing. Um, it's like I live and let live. If you want to be whoever you are, that's fine, fantastic. I love you, whatever. But back then, as a teenager, I'm like, I got to be better. I'm going to be better. I am better, and that only goes so far until it's a self-destructive thing. And if that's some things like, I have a rites of passage where I work with the youth. We talk about things like that, about our egos and it being out of proportion and, what the future goals are. Because, it only takes 30 seconds to end up in jail for 30 years,
Right.
right? And it's allowing your anger to consume you. It's allowing whatever, we used to have back in the day, somebody stepped on your sneakers and then all of a sudden that's the situation. And now you're doing 10 years because
Right.
killed somebody or 20 years or whatever it is, you know versus other things like you get involved in situations where it's going to lead to jail and you do it anyway because you
Right.
think somehow you're not going to get caught. You're doing the same thing at the same place at the same spot every day from 9 to 9, but you ain't going to get caught.
Well, I heard someone say before that ego is the acronym for edging God out.
It is. It
And
absolutely
that
is.
you are actually saying, no, God, I'm bigger than you. I'm going to take over. And he has to go, God then has to say, well,
He'll
now I have
humble
to
you.
give you a
Yeah,
situation
he'll humble you for
to,
sure.
to, to humble you. So
Hmm.
that's the process. And so yeah, no, but I love the way you said that though.
Hmm.
It was off balance. I love the way you put that. I love the way you put that. So but no, what we're looking forward, we're gonna look forward to volume to the next volume, Jason. Somewhere down north, just the title alone blesses those of us who have migrated from New York to other places.
Hmm.
We've gone back to the South,
Hmm.
and what I really valued about reading your book was it allowed a moment for me to be in the South and then looking at the North
Hmm.
as the landscape for evolution, of a
Hmm.
movement,
Hmm.
of our identity that you're talking about, forming
Hmm.
that through music, through our faith, through our relationships, our family, our communities. That is what I feel your book is speaking to in this time, that though all of, and I said this to you privately, but I'm going to say it publicly, that your stories were placed on, on social media for us to read and enjoy. But there is a time where we need to get back to what community looks like.
Hmm.
And if you've never experienced it, you don't know what to look for. You don't know what to remember.
Hmm.
You can't put it back together because you don't know. And I think what your story and what your book does is it brings the pieces together so that people can look for, oh, it's family, it's God, it's community, it's housing, it's health. I mean, when you talk about your grandmother and her dementia, like I mean, I went into like just the thought of what that looks like for families who don't have the resources that you were able to have because you did what she raised you to do, and you returned the love um deeply for her and made sure she was cared for on those Sundays, right?
Hmm.
Where we hear about people who suffer dementia and no one goes to visit them in those
Mm.
homes and things
Yeah,
like that.
let me say something to that, Martina.
Beautiful.
So that was one of the things that was pulling at me because I used to go visit her, and a lot of times they would bring it to the rec room, or I would have to wait in the rec room while they went to go get her to bring her to the rec room, or sometimes I'd be in her room. But the times in which I had to be in the rec room, there were a lot of people, as you just stated, in there, and no one was coming to see them. And that was probably one of the most depressing things that I experienced because, you can feel that energy draw. Like they wanted me to say something to them, right? And I was having hard enough time talking to my grandmother, mom's what I called her.
Mhm.
But they would just inch closer and they'd look and they smile and they want the conversation because it's that human contact that we all need, and it was one of the worst feelings because I'm talking about, and it turned into Sundays. I was going 2, 3 times a week, and I was like, that's too much because I was getting
Mm.
depressed,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like what people don't realize. It's like when a person has dementia, there's people connected and attached to them, and it's really hard on everyone that is attached to them, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's like you've lost a person, but they're still existing, living, breathing, but the capacity to communicate has diminished or remember or whatever. Now, I will say this. When my aunt came in the room, I've seen this for myself too. So I used to say this to myself. This is how I figured it out with my grandma. Like she would be off, and this is how I would say it to myself. She would be off in some other universe, right? And she's doing whatever she's doing, and she's just, she's there for now. And when my aunt came in the room, it was this recognition, right? And it was like, that's my daughter, that type of thing. When my Uncle Leroy, it's really my cousin, but we call him Uncle Cousin, uh, came into the room, instant recognition. And I don't care how far along she was in not speaking. And she
Wow.
went months without speaking. When they came in, she instantly recognized them, right? And one time I was there, and this is after she even stopped speaking too, and she was in there for a couple years. Um, the nurse came in. She's like, "Oh, did I introduce you to my grandson, Jason?" Right, just out of nowhere, and I hadn't heard her speak for you know like a year. And so it's those things that God is kind of tapping you on your shoulders, like, yeah, she's still there, she's still there, she's still there,
Yeah.
and to see that. But it's also that space that He created that me and God got closer, right? Where I could reflect and I could talk about my grandmother and just really think about what she represented in my life as well as what God represented in her life because I don't see the two as separate per se because she relied on him so much, right? She's like the physical version of a idea or a spirit, that's working through her. Just like when I'm writing this book, when you read what you just read, and you read it to me and I wrote it, I don't remember writing those things. I don't recall putting those words down. So when you're reading it to me, it's like it's new to me. And I've read this book like 3 times. I'm like, when did I write that? When did
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like now, granted, I write at 3 o'clock in the morning. I might just be tired, but I'm telling you, when I read it, it's like I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. 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 Well, it came from a divine place that is being used to just bless all of us. And so I just want to remind everybody if you have not picked up your copy of Somewhere Down North, it is on Amazon. It is available on Kindle where you can get it instantly. Or if you're like me, you wanted the hard copy. So when it's time, Jason, you can sign it. I will have my book with my annotations and all that in it. And so we just want to say thank you
Hey,
again.
before you go, because
Uh-huh.
I always
Uh-huh.
forget. I
Go
always
ahead.
forget. So let me thank Jonette Mines because she's been working behind the scenes. Particularly people in White Plains, Elise Lugo, and I wrote something thanking everybody, but I still like to do it.
Please
Uh,
do.
right, and I want to thank Big Media Agency and marketing people that I hired to kind of put the book in a larger context, Travis Mitchell, Janet Coleman, you know, Brenda. I was like Brenda, my aunt Brenda, all the Hadleys, you know, it's just like I have a wonderful family, and that's a blessing too. Not everybody has a wonderful family. I love my family, you know. And I just think about all the good times that we've had, and just me watching them as a young person to now. And I like good people. I like positive people. I like people that are going to help. I like people that's about the community. Daryl Jenkins. See, I'll talk my way into it. So Daryl Jenkins, and the person I always looked up to, Miss Sandra, where Miss Sandra, I can see it, and I can't see everybody, so I don't. I see there's more people than what I'm looking on the screen, but I can't see, so I don't even know who's here. So I'm just talking. Um, but yeah, and again, if you just go to my Facebook page, you can see because that one I kind of thought out, and I said, these are the people I need to thank. So.
Well, we thank you for writing the stories, for
Oh,
making them
Cultural
real.
Horizons. How I'm gonna say not Cultural Horizons?
That's right. And so,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that.
Hmm.
Um, we this is the inaugural event of Cultural Horizons Foundation. And Jason, the stories of that are in your book are, once again, commingled. All of this is about this community and these relationships. And across from um, where you are, the book setting is the place where for 3 decades, Black young students would go and come together. And there's a whole story behind Cultural Horizons where um, Lester Cousin Jr. told me this story. I'm going to end it on this and then end it on a song that we mentioned. But Lester Cousin Jr. told me the story of how they advocated for a space for Black students in the late 60s, early 70s, where they would have a space where they could do the music, all about the culture, a safe space for Black students. And at the time, the administrator said, this will happen over my dead body. There will not be a choir in this school. Well, that summer he died.
Mm.
And this Cultural Horizons was started. And Lester Cousin Jr. was one of the founding people for Cultural Horizons. And so we would do these reunions out of this idea that we could not forget the stories. We did not know that we were going to come to this point of intentional erasure of our history, intentional, uh, you know, denial of having Black educators. We had Black educators. We like you said, being smart. We remember when Roots came out. All of those
Mhm.
things are part of our background and our history in a community where no matter how far we have been, from New York to you to Maryland to me now in Texas, all of this, the bond has not been broken. We still have that closeness. And that is because there was someone being intentional about creating an entity, an organization that held that together. And so it is just a great honor that we went and we got, my husband and I went and got permission from Lester and Ms. Green to go and start this as a foundation, which you are now on the board of that foundation. And this is the inaugural event of that. We are broadcasting from the Purple M.I.C podcast because that was my effort to mentor a young woman who is doing music. She's an artist. And she does music, looking at it in terms of civic education and political activism. Everything that you're talking about is our responsibility to be able to transmit these stories and this power that we received that was just rooted in love, Jason. It
Mm.
was just unconditional love that we were able to operate in. And I feel like, that's one of the things. So one of the songs that you mentioned before we got on here was Going Up Yonder. And That was the, oh, that's the wrong song, sorry, but the Going Up Yonder. And we used to sing that in Cultural Rising. So I'm going to end this, but we are going to make sure that Going Up Yonder is a song that is played at the next, at somewhere at the next one, because that was something that you ended with, was that that was a song that you remember. And so I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity to just have this time together. This has been wonderful and I appreciate it. And so if you're here, please go on to the Purple M.I.C pod on YouTube and like and subscribe so that you can continue to see the things that Culture Horizons Foundation will co-sponsor with the Purple M.I.C podcast, as we are really looking towards creating spaces in the future for young people to have the opportunity to remember and remember love that builds identity and community and just true compassion in community. So thank you. Welcome.